Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and we are back. For this video, we want to look at exactly what are custom endpoints. Now, in Rust systems, you hear custom endpoints here and there most of the time, but most of the times when you don't even really know what those are. So, for this situation, I'm going to show you how to create an endpoint that can pull some data from your database and how endpoints basically work. So as you can see when I click on this area here, I'm getting some data from a custom endpoint which I have created here on these custom endpoints. And this is what we want to do. We're going to look at how get requests work and how post requests also work. So let's go ahead. I'm going to remove everything that I already have and we are going to start again from scratch. Alright, um, so delete this, okay, and publish. So this should now be an empty area. So for instance, I have a table called posts, right? I want to be able to get posts using an endpoint. Now the reason for this is you might want to give other people the ability of getting some data from your database into the application, right? So maybe you have created a, a property management application or a room management application with Rust systems, and it has picked up and now it has many users, and you want to allow other developers to be able to kind of cross check with your database whether maybe certain things appear in the database. So that's what we're trying to do. So for my situation, I want to allow people to be able to pull specific blogs, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is pull all the blogs. This might be for a situation where maybe somebody wants to get blogs from my application, and I also want to pull blogs based on ID. That would be our situation where maybe somebody clicks on a single blog and they want to see that single blog somewhere. Right, so let's go ahead and start that, and you're going to begin by creating a custom endpoint. So I'm using PrimeView, and PrimeView, if you're using Quasar, it will be a little bit different, but for my situation, this will be the same. The only difference that's going to be for Quasar is when you are doing the page design here, because the code is different here. But if you're using Quasar and Node.js, the custom endpoint will be the same. Right, so I'm going to start by doing my control in custom component data. So I normally do it in component data, but you can do it in any of these. However, if you decide to do it on the home page, you notice that you don't really get an API path here. So if I do custom components, I'm going to do it in custom components here, or I can just do it in post. So this is just the file name of the controller that you're going to be using. So I'm going to call this get posts. So as you can see now, if I click down here, I get the URL for my API endpoint. Right, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say select everything from the table that we want to get it from. So I'm just going to remove this because we don't really need this where condition here. So I'm just going to say select from posts. Right, I don't also need this query parameter because this is just for getting all of them, getting all the posts, right? So now that being done, we are done with that. So we have successfully created a custom endpoint. Now, if you're a developer and you need to dive deeper into how this happens, when you create this code inside a custom endpoint, it will not always be inside your blog hero. So it will always be inside your controllers here. Inside, so for example, if you notice, we created it in custom endpoint post file. So if you go to controllers and go to posts, you'll notice that the code is going to be, let me just expand this so that you can see. The code is going to be here. You scroll down, you notice that now it gets added here. So in case you need to edit it, maybe manually, you get it there. But for this one, you're just doing it in Rust systems. So what you're going to do is you're going to now go to our home page. So this is basically where I want to see this. And I'm going to drag and drop a custom view here. And what I'm going to do is create a button that we want to display the data. So button. So if you're doing Quasar, it might be QBTN, right? So for this one is going to be button, and the label is going to be equals to get posts, and we want to have a click event which should be for when this button is clicked, right? So up to this point we don't really have the click event, so we are going to remove that, and we can publish our application. Right, so now we have a button here. So we want to now create a variable that will be visible when we want to create a variable that will show the blog posts, right? So the way we do that, we are going to create this variable called const post. So let's do const posts like this, and it's going to be an empty, a reactive array, right? So it's going to be a reactive array like this. So by default, it's going to be empty. So now what we can do is we are going to add it here, and let's do posts, right? So when we publish this, so you notice that now we should get an empty array here, right? So we want, when we click on this button, this array kind of gets populated, right? So what we can do is we can come here, and another thing you notice is if you do it as an empty array like this, it adds these brackets here. So you can just remove those brackets, and it should just disappear while still staying there. So now, having done that, we don't really need to do a lot. All we have to do is go to radsystems, and we're going to copy this code here, which is the code that's given for you. So all you have to do is rename it accordingly. So I'm just going to call this get posts, right? So this is a function that is going to be responsible for getting posts. So we can just say get all posts, right? So now the only thing that you need to do here is you need to change this function here, this string, and it's going to be the name of your endpoint here, the route for your endpoint. So come back to your custom JavaScript and add that there, right? So now the last thing you need to do is this. This my API data is a variable that RAS system assumes you have already created it like this here at the top, right? So because we are not using that, we are using post. We are going to use post dot value. Now the reason why we are doing dot value, so like if you do post like this, it's not really going to work because this is a reactive variable. Now in Vue.js, reactive variables, you have to extend it using a dot value so that you can assign some new value to it. So that's not really that complicated, but so here's the thing. When you're doing it from the custom JavaScript, you need to assign a value to it or get its value, you need to use dot value. But when you're displaying it in the front end here, you notice we don't really need to do dot value here. We just paste it directly. Right, so now that we have this function here and we have already assigned this to it, you can just copy this function, and this function is now going to be in our click events, right? So when you go to our button that we created here at the top, we can now comfortably create a click event. So you can do at click is equals to get posts. Great. So now if you publish your application, it says there's a problem. So this is a UI issue. So it means we need to put a space between that and the click event. So now when you come back here and you click on this, you should be able to get all the blogs that are available for that particular database. So from your database, you should be able to have all these blogs. Now the next thing we need to do is to get an individual blog post, right? So what you're going to do is go to custom endpoints, and you're going to create a new one. Let's say posts. Let's do posts like that, and let's say get single post like that. So for get single post, we have to pass a parameter. Now this parameter is going to be the post ID. So we're going to say post ID. Now what we need to do here is we need to define it. We're going to say let post ID is going to be equals to rec.params. So this is going to be fetching this parameter that you have here, dot post ID. So this has to be exactly like you have called it here, right? So now the next thing you need to do is we need to now pass this post ID we have just defined here and put it here in the parameters. And now we can do select everything from posts where ID is equals to param1. So this param1 is just this. It doesn't have to be param1. It can be rec ID or whatever. So as long as if you change it here, then you also have to change it here, because you might have uh, several parameters if you need. So now we have already defined this, and now remember we are still interested in this. So you copy this URL, but keep in mind that this custom endpoint expects a URL, a parameter here. Great. So click on that, and now let's go back to our custom view here. So this button here, what you are going to do is let's have another. Let's first go here, and I'm just going to paste that there, and I want to now get a single post. So just come here and you're going to say get single post, like that, right? And now we need to have like const single post, like that, is equals to ref. All right, so you're going to have it like that. And what you're going to do now here is we now want to assign this response to the single post variable we have just created here at the top. Right, so remember we now need to replace this here. But remember, we now need to pass an ID of the post that we need. Now, how do we do that? So the way we are going to do that is we are going to pass a parameter here, call it ID. So at this point, we don't really know the ID, but you cannot add a variable inside a string this way. So the way we add variables inside a string is we pass it using a $sign and some brackets, and we don't use speech marks, we instead use this, like this. And now when you call this, it expects that you're going to pass an ID here, which in the return is going to be added there. So great. Now let's copy this. You're going to copy that, and what you're going to do is you're going to create a new button here. So let me start by just pasting this here, and I'm going to copy this button, and let me put it down below here, and we are going to instead replace this with an ID here, right? So you're going to replace it with an ID. So let's say maybe you want to get of ID 1. So I want to say this is going to get say get single post, like that. Alright, so with that you can click OK, and this should be able to go ahead and trigger this. However, it's assigning to this single post, so we need to get this variable and add it maybe right after this. So this should be for single post and then let's add it here like this. There you go. So when you go and publish your application now, you can say get single post, and this should get only the blogs which is for ID number 8. If you click for get post, you should get all the blogs here. Now in most situations you want all the blogs to be loaded when the page loads. You don't want to click a button for them to appear. So the way you handle that in Vue.js is you come to where you created this, and in radsystems there's this called onMounted. Now the onMounted basically is a lifecycle hook that allows you to load or call functions or do all that stuff before the page loads. So we want to get all the blog posts when the page loads, like this. So you just come here and replace that there. So when you publish, you will notice that all your blogs will be loading every time your application starts, like that. So for the single post, you can just call it later on. Now in radsystems there's something called data repeater. So the data repeater, you can pass an endpoint to it, and it should be able to display that data for you. So for example, you can just drag and drop this repeater, and you can come here on the data source, you can select the endpoint you want. So maybe for this get post, and you are going to click on OK. Now for the template, you can use this template here to display your data. So all you have to do is click on that, and your data repeater should be visible here on the right side here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just remove this get all posts, right? So I'm also going to remove this post here. so that we can only see this data repeater. So I'm just going to create a new section and drag and drop the repeater there and publish. Alright, so now you can see the data repeater looks returns something that looks like this. There you go. So now you can format this to be however or whichever way that you want it to look like. So for example, maybe we want only the content. So if you go here, I'll have the category and have the content. So maybe I want just the content. I'm just going to go to the data repeater here where I have this display template, and instead of this data here, I'm just going to do data dot content like that, publish. So now you notice it is returning my data here, and because this data is formatted using HTML, I'm going to do vHTML instead of just passing it here. So I'm going to remove this directory from this, and I'm going to come here and do vHTML is equals to this. Now the reason why I'm doing this is because if you check this, it's starting with PPP. You see, like it's formatted, it has H1s, all that. So the reason for vHTML is to display them as just like they were created. So as you can see now, we have those posts appearing like that. So this is what a data repeater does, right? So maybe we want now, when I click on this, because it has a unique ID, I want to grab the post here and display it here at the top. Now remember, that's what we just did on the previous function. So what I'm going to do, I want to go here and do when I click on it, this function will be executed. So now instead of passing this manually, it's going to be dynamic from the repeater. So if I come back to the repeater, I'm just going to go to where it has already defined this. So I want to do when this gets clicked, I want to now call this function, right? So I want to call this. So great. So now instead of passing 7 here, I want to now pass the ID itself, because remember here they are doing data. So I want to use data here, and I'm going to do data dot ID like that. So when I publish this, it says there's an error. Yeah, there's an error. So it seems I did something wrong here. Yep, that. So when I publish this, now when I click on this, it should show this particular blog post. If I click on this, it should show this 7. If I click on this, it should show that 8. So that's basically how these things work. So if you give somebody this endpoint you just created from your application, they should be able to perform these actions specifically. So this is how you do GET requests in RAD systems, and maybe in the next video we are going to look at how you do POST request. That will be it for this video, and see you in the next one.